Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Pozos, and here with me is Omar Pozos, my co-host and husband. And how are you doing, Omar?
I'm doing great. We're recording this Wednesday before the 4th of July. So I already told Vanessa this morning, I was like, I want to grill some hot dogs and some burgers and just be very, very American.
You're that type of person who you pre-plan out meals well in advance. I feel like holidays, birthdays, you'll be like months out from your birthday, and you'll randomly look at me and be like, you know what? I think I want to do pizza for my birthday this year.
Yeah. You're
like,
great. Yo, pizza in 3 months. Yeah.
Day of what do you think? What should we eat for dinner? And you're like, I've already planned this out 3 months ago.
Well, I'm like, the way I think about it is like, okay, so 4th of July, I'm like, what's more American than hot dogs and burgers and going boating and all that stuff? So to me, I'm like, I already know what I'm going to want to eat. And so I just pre-plan.
Yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with that. And I am the one who gets to enjoy your planning when it comes to food. So
Exactly. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We were, for the listeners, we were planning on taking a trip, leaving tomorrow for actually an international trip, going to Canada to see friends, and things have just been really busy
Not
lately.
very American of us.
Yeah, kind of a weird timing to go celebrate 4th of July in Canada. But we were excited for the trip. We had planned it a couple months back, but as we got closer, it just realizing timing wise, running a business, it's like end of month, end of quarter.
Mm-hmm.
We just have a lot of projects that we're working on. You kind of have to take that step back and be like, all right, and that's where we realized we need to cancel the trip and take time to work. So I'm feeling a lot more peaceful today since we won't be traveling tomorrow. And I was a little bit stressed about that, but
maybe, you know what it is? Maybe my planning ahead is me coping that we're not going on this trip and being like, you know what? The next best thing is burgers and hot dogs. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, on today's episode, so I've been having some good conversations with clients lately, and a big theme being really reminding people the importance of stress management when it comes to healing our hormones. And so, we talk about, when it comes to balancing hormones, we talk about, how to eat, we talk about, how to exercise, we talk about, supplements, and a lot of different things that come into hormone balancing. What we have to keep returning to time and time again is reminding everyone, I need to remind myself of this all the time. I remind clients of this. It's something that I think I could do a better job of even reminding, Instagram and everyone out there of truly how pivotal of a role stress management plays in balancing your hormones. You cannot out supplement or out eat or, out exercise, habit, anything, your stress, because ultimately, when your body is stressed, your adrenals are going to prioritize creating cortisol and not going to be prioritizing creating other hormones that your body is, possibly, like a lot of women, top of mind for me. I was talking to some clients who are all low progesterone right now, and there's such a thing as progesterone steal, where essentially your adrenals will steal the resources from creating progesterone to create cortisol if your body is in a state of stress. And so emphasis there being that just stress is going to stop your progress. And so when we talk about stress, we've talked about so many different aspects of this, but I think something that can hold a lot of people back is in their journey, when they're actively doing the work, they're, following a hormone healing protocol, a gut healing protocol, they're working on their nutrition, they're doing all these things, they might hold themselves back because of 4 very common mindset blocks that I see. And so what I wanted to go over on this episode is some simple shifts you can take if you find yourself falling into these traps with mindset that are causing you to feel stressed and to stress your body.
And before we dive into all of that, maybe I should have waited until after you shared them. But anyways, I'll do it now. I think the problem, and I think the frustration and where a lot of people get it wrong is the concept of instant gratification. And what I mean by that is, managing stress and going for a walk and meditating. To me, it's not as sexy as oh my gosh, I just, lost so much inflammation, or, oh my gosh, my energy is great, right? And I think that's where people get it backwards, where they're like, if only I felt better, then sure, Vanessa, I would dive into the stress management. If only this, if only that. And I'm like, well, it's actually the opposite, because unfortunately, it's the boring, consistent stuff that you do day in and day out that's going to get you the results. And if you think about it, and I think there's a framework or a fallacy. It's the when then fallacy, right? And it's hey, people don't go to a hospital when they're healed. People don't invest into their business or into themselves when they have all the money in the world. It's you do it now so that down the road you can reap the benefits and all that stuff. And so that's, I think, a reminder for people. Like, for example, right now I'm like, for us, working on the business and canceling a trip isn't the sexiest and most fun thing. But if down the road, it's going to continue to help support the goals and the things that we want to do for the business and for our clients, I'm like, great. Then if it means us taking a step back, there's going to be other times that we can do this. But I think that's where, the frustration, I think that's where people tend to oversee that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. So let's then, let's dive into these mindset shifts here. So, this is really top of mind of truly just things I've been seeing with some conversations with clients this week. So the first one being perfectionistic thinking. And so this is a common block that a lot of people fall into. I think a lot of people even will almost identify in this way of almost kind of feeling like it's like the positive of, like when someone does a job interview and they're like, my biggest weakness is that I care too much.
That I do too much stuff.
You're trying to position something as a weakness, but actually as a strength. A lot of people I think will take perfectionism and be like, oh, I'm just such a perfectionist. But from this place of they have no intention of wanting to change it. They see it actually as a good thing.
Yeah.
So when it comes to our health and fitness, for those of you who feel called out by that, if you're someone who identifies as a perfectionist, this can really get in the way of our long-term health, because if you're holding yourself to this standard of perfection of I'm going to do everything perfectly, I'm going to just, cross my T's, dot my I's, I am never going to miss a thing, and you have that standard for yourself, and then what's going to happen? You're not going to always be able to uphold that standard because life is always going to get in the way. You cannot always anticipate what obstacles are going to come about. And so the shift, I really want to encourage anybody who finds himself in a pattern of perfectionistic thinking and then finds himself getting stressed when they are not able to meet their standard for themselves as a perfectionist in their health and fitness. I want you to catch yourself falling into that trap of perfectionism and shift to, I'm going to focus on small daily habits. I think when we can just kind of break things down into very singular, very granular, just daily habits with small little shifts in those habits, that's where actually just let the time pass, let those habits work for you, and it's amazing what can happen. One of my kind of favorite little analogies to come back to, this is from James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits. And I first read this book, 6 years ago now, and I still reference this all the time with clients. And that is the concept of, he talks about if a plane were to take off from LA in trying to reach New York City, if the pilot made just a 2-degree shift in the direction that the plane is facing upon takeoff, and then just kind of heads in that direction from there, it would actually change where they land by, I think, instead of ending up in New York City, they would end up in DC, Washington, DC. That's over the expansive, width of the United States, that tiny little shift that is just not even noticeable upon takeoff. The passengers would not notice if the pilot's you know what, we're not going to go this way. We're going to shift 2 degrees over. Nobody would notice that. But over the course of time, that 2-degree shift becomes massive. That's what's happening with our day-to-day shifts. If I tell a client, hey, let's drop this idea of needing to be perfect with something that is new for us, that is challenging, that is really hard right now, and let's instead see what it would look like to make a 2-degree shift in that habit that you're struggling with right now. I can tell you a lot of my perfectionist clients would be like, oh, that is not enough. I need to be perfect. I need to be excelling from day one.
What do you mean I don't have to work out 7 days a week, Vanessa?
They'd be like, that is not enough. I need to see fast results. I'm not going to get there fast enough. And what I have to remind them of is, hey, we need to not think about what this 2-degree shift is going to do for you today. We need to think about what it's going to do on a longer time horizon of if we make a 2-degree shift and then we keep making 2-degree shifts, we're going to, over the course of time, end up in a completely different place.
And I think also the other aspect of it is the sustainability of it, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of, especially right now around the holidays, so it's okay, if you're traveling, if you have kids, work, and all that stuff, it's if you can't sustainably, do what you're currently doing, then inevitably you are going to fall off track. And at that point, you stay stuck in the same cycle of trying to do the same things over and over and expecting different results. And I tell people, and I'm pretty sure that's the definition of insanity.
Yeah, absolutely. The next mindset shift that I've been seeing a lot of lately is really, and I should say the mindset block, the pattern I'm seeing is a lot of women falling into a trap of guilt and shame. So guilt around things that they maybe have done that they're like, man, like I wasn't perfect with this past week, kind of again falling back in the perfectionism, but it might have just been like, oh man, my goal this past week was X, I didn't do it, I'm feeling guilty. It might be guilt and shame in the context of I'm trying to make this change with my health and I'm finding myself around people who don't understand the change I'm trying to make, and I'm feeling kind of like shameful of trying to make this change in front of people. Like it can show up in different areas in different ways. And what I always want to remind people of is that the way you think about it is going to be the way that you feel about it. And so if you're thinking about it in a way that's creating guilt and shame, let's shift how we're thinking about it. And so a really easy shift for this is really just replacing whatever is causing you to feel guilt and shame. Replace it with pride for what it is that you're doing. Be proud of the fact that you're doing something that people around you don't even fully understand, because it's probably hard, because it's probably something that they, you're essentially different in a way of like, you're doing something that a lot of people don't do. And so by definition, that's what's going to make you exceptional as opposed to being average, right? An analogy I was just thinking about this morning, I've talked about, I think, several times in the podcast, one of my favorite email newsletters is The Heal Bloom. And, I think it was just today, he sent out an email that I was reading through, and he was referencing one of those kind of parables that you and I have referenced, I think, on the podcast before, and that's the stonecutter analogy. And so kind of like short version of the story, it's basically someone walks up on these three builders. And so one guy, he's laying down bricks, and he asks the guy, hey, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm laying down bricks. Then the next guy, he walks over to him, and he's like, hey, what are you doing? And he's like,
Well, they're cutting stone to lay the bricks. That's why it's a stone cutter.
That would make sense. Yeah, I'm
Not
butchering
a
the story
bricklaying analogy. Yeah, but go ahead.
The bricklayer. So they're cutting stone, and he walks over to the first stone cutter, and he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm, cutting stone. Goes to the next guy, he's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm building a wall. He goes to the third guy, and he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, turns to him, and he just got this big smile, and he goes, I'm building a cathedral. So all three of these guys are doing the exact same action, but each one of them was thinking about it in a different way. And when he went to the third guy, the third stonecutter, who's actually telling himself and reminding himself of like, I'm doing something great here, I'm building a cathedral, he felt differently about the actions, and you could see it in his emotions. You could see it in the way that he just like was rapidly doing this and like doing it with such passion and just really probably a lot more care going into the stone cutting. And ultimately what this comes back to for our health and fitness here, if you are going about the actions, the maybe the habits and lifestyle changes you're aiming to make, things that you're doing with your nutrition, with your health and fitness that feel unusual for you, and maybe feel unusual for even some people you spend time around, that can feel really uncomfortable. And like, you can position that as being something that's shameful, or you can position it as, I'm doing something really great. I'm doing something that a lot of people don't do. And a lot of people will stay stuck in their bodies, feeling uncomfortable, feeling unhealthy for a long time. And just be proud of yourself and like really create pride around what you are building for yourself.
And the coolest thing is, fortunately, this cathedral that we're talking about is your body. And so to me, it's like, hey, this is the one body that you get for the rest of your life. And right now, if you're feeling lethargic, or, hormones are dysregulated, menstrual cycles are dysregulated, you're not feeling confident, I'm like, what a better time, or what a better thing to invest your time, effort, and energy into than your body. And at the end of the day, I mean, we all go through this, right? And we've talked about this on the podcast, but you'll share these things with friends and family, and hopefully you do have that supportive group behind you. And they'll be like, amazing, like, great, that's awesome. To where, so many people get in their own heads and they're like, oh my gosh, what is Susie or Karen or, Jimmy gonna say? And they're not even thinking about, I know, those Karens, and they're not even thinking about you to begin with,
Yeah, absolutely. The next block that I've been seeing a lot of lately is feeling stressed about your body. And so very simply, like, we're talking about how like these mindset blocks are going to create stress in and of yourself. Well, a common thing I'll see is that, women might start on a journey and they're like, all right, I'm going to get myself to a place, like, I'm sick of feeling how I'm feeling in my body. I'm sick of like month after month having these symptoms I'm dealing with. I'm sick of putting on clothes and not feeling comfortable. They're like, all right, this is it. I'm going to make a change. And the thing is, kind of what you had mentioned earlier, is when people will kind of like embark on the change, we kind of have this like feeling of, okay, I should expect to feel the results of me like
Right away.
making this decision right away. And the reality is there's this uncomfortable waiting period where you might not see the results yet. And that the length of that period can vary depending on the person. So it's like, it's especially hard if you're someone who has a lot of complex issues going on, a lot of layers to peel back, to where it's going to be longer before you experience and feel those changes. And you might be looking at people alongside you who are seeing and feeling changes faster. You might even feel discouraged by that. And if you allow yourself, you allow your brain to continue to go in this place of just like criticizing yourself and being like, gosh, I'm so unhappy in my body. I hate the way my body looks. I hate the way I feel putting on my clothes. I'm like so sick of feeling this way. And you just like stay there rather than just like getting glimpses of it and allowing it to be like fuel to keep going. You like sit in that place. What's going to happen? You're going to feel really discouraged. You're going to stress yourself out. And when you're actually stressing yourself out, because every time you look in the mirror, you're like, oh, I hate the way I look. That thought creates stress in the body. What's going to happen? What did we talk about at the beginning of this episode? Stress is going to block your body from balancing your hormones out, and you're going to stay in that place. And then it becomes this like cycle that feeds itself, right? So if you're someone who you find yourself feeling stressed about where your body is at right now, physically, symptoms you're still experiencing, the way your clothes fit, where your weight's at, anything like that, the shift you can make at any moment when you feel that come up is towards gratitude for your body. Have gratitude for what you do have. And this is one of those things where, something we were listening to in a podcast recently was, this was I think an Alex Hormozi podcast. And he was talking about how he's made, anybody who doesn't know who Hormozi is, he's like a pretty big guy in the entrepreneur business space. And he's talked a lot about how, he's had like realizations lately of the power of gratitude. And this is something that like we've always talked about, and we've like been, big believers in like, we have to be working on gratitude. And so it's cool to see people who even like at that high level of space, acknowledging and recognizing that like gratitude is so important at every level, no matter what you are achieving. And something that he talked about that I thought was interesting is that for himself, it's not always that easy to just be like, let me be kind of like grateful for what I have. For him, he like takes it to a different extreme of let me be so grateful for all the things I don't have, like all the things I do not want to be experiencing. Like he'll take any situation and he'll just be like, what would be like the worst possible case of this? And he'll like sit in and feel and imagine what it would be like to be on that case. And then he'll come back to his reality and be like, oh my gosh, like this is great. I'm so glad that I'm not dealing with that, right? And so this could be on any level with your health. Maybe if you're like, gosh, I hate how I'm feeling when I get PMS every month. And like when you're in it and you're experiencing PMS, you're like, this is terrible. Maybe think about people that are, and this can be different for everybody, but like there's probably a lot of things you could think about of people dealing with things that are realistically are a lot worse than painful cramping. And I say that as someone who has dealt with very bad PMS, very painful cramps, but like there's still a lot worse things that you could be dealing with. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, here's a good example. And this is an opening into Omar's mind, which is kind of weird. But even like last night, right? So we canceled our trip. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, dang, am I a little disappointed? I'm like, a little bit, yeah. And then I thought about this specifically. And I said, I was like, well, what if I had gone and like broken my arm? Like, what if I had gone and like, I don't know, like just gotten injured or like something would have happened. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm very grateful to have great health today. And I'm very grateful to still be at home and still get to celebrate. Sure, not around friends and stuff, but it's still a good, like we still have a great life. And so this morning I woke up and I was like, okay, well, this one didn't work out, but I'm sure there's going to be other opportunities. And when you go into that extreme to where like, for example, in your body, if you're like, oh my gosh, well, today, at least I have a menstrual cycle, right? At least like my hormones are somewhat, working well. And so it's when you think back and you're like, oh my gosh, like, there's people dealing with infertility or, loss of a family member or like something more extreme to where you're like, oh my gosh, you know what, today I might not be in the best of health quite yet, or I might not be in the best of, confidence quite yet, but I'm working on it and, it's going to get there. Anyways, that was my analogy this morning where I was like, okay, I'm like, things are going to be fine. I'll figure it out.
Totally. I mean, it can be a serious reality check if you're like, man, here I am just getting upset over what I saw in the mirror just now. The reality is like, there are some people that didn't even wake up today. And like at a very basic level, you could back yourself no matter what is going on in your life, no matter what it is that you're experiencing, you could back yourself all the way down to at least I woke up this morning. That gives me something to be grateful for. And it's like, this is such a skill to build over time, of the ability to find gratitude no matter what is going on around you. But if you develop that skill, and I say develop that skill, meaning like it takes practice, it takes work, just like building a muscle. But if you develop and you hone that muscle of gratitude, it will serve you tremendously. Last one on the mindset shifts that I want to share today. I think I said mindset shifts that I want to share today. I feel like I'm like in the Sally sells seashore shells by the seashore.
Sally sells seashores by the, I don't know, seashells by the shore. Anyway.
She sells seashells by the seashore. Ooh, nailed it. So the last one I want to share is seeing slip-ups as setbacks. And so I think at any point in a journey, we all have to remind ourselves that it is not going to be this constant upward trajectory of, success, right? You're not going to lose weight every single day or week, week over week. You're not going to see progress in your symptoms just consistently, month over month over month. There will be setbacks in every area at any point in a journey, no matter what you are, no matter who you are, no matter what you achieve. I experienced this myself. Now, the shift here is when you have a setback, not if you have a setback, but when you have a setback, reminding yourself that slip-ups are not setbacks. Slip-ups are motivational tune-ups. Because sometimes, in order to motivate ourselves, I think we have to almost re-experience a little bit of like the pain that comes with like, oh man, here I am feeling this way again. And like, it's frustrating to be like, I never thought I was going to feel it. Like I thought this was in the past. I thought I lost the weight for good. And here I went up a little bit on the scale. It's like sometimes every once in a while, for things to be truly sustainable long-term, I would argue that like, it's going to be a little bit of like an up and down.
Peaks and valleys.
Peaks and valleys. And what should actually happen over the course of time is that your valleys get higher and higher and higher. So it's not going like the same peak to the same valley over and over and over again. That is not what we mean here. What I'm talking about here is that you reach a new peak and then you have a little bit of a valley that's a little bit below that peak, but then you reach an even higher peak and then you have a little bit of a valley. And that's just like the realities of life, and especially with health. I have to remind myself of this over and over again because I will have symptoms that come back. I'm kind of in that place right now. I was talking with Omar this week. Part of the reason we canceled this trip is because my stress has been high, and I felt it in my cycle this past month. I had a very high PMS cycle. I had some more dips in my mood and energy. It had a little more cramping and like things that I haven't experienced in many months now. And it was like scary and frustrating. Like I think for those who have been there before, like when you feel like you're on the other side of it and you re-experience that symptom again, it almost feels a little bit of like a micro trauma where you're like, oh my gosh, I do not want to end up back in this place. And it's frustrating, but guess what? It is motivating as heck to where like when I feel that, I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm
clapping hands, like,
dialing
all right.
in my stress. We're doing all the things, and that's where then you make bigger decisions that I might not have otherwise made, like canceling the trip, knowing that was going to be more stressful than anything. So ultimately, these are just a couple of common mindset blocks I'm seeing that I find create a lot of stress for people. And if you can just start to name and identify these mindset blocks, and then have whether it's the ones I shared here or another shift that maybe you've thought of as you're listening to this episode, but have like a go-to kind of shift for yourself of how you're going to catch it and change what's happening in your mind so that you can maybe, even though you experience stress in a moment, you can quickly bounce back from that stress and come back to baseline. That's the skill that we ultimately want to acquire. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. If it was, do me a favor, send it to a friend, send it to somebody who would benefit from hearing this. And if you're not already, make sure you subscribe so you never miss another episode. We'll be back next week.
Bye, everybody. Happy 4th.